Hey guys, DibtheAwesome here to give you yet another ML video. Sorry, I took a pause there because it took time for me to think what what this video was today. Today this video will be a discussion. We're going to be discussing the rivalry between Fatid and Undertaker. We're going to be discussing their pros, their cons, which do I personally think is better, all of that jazz. So I think it's only fair that we talk about Undertaker first because he came first. Basically, Fatid is the nature's categories, Undertaker with different benefits and cons and, all that jazz, different movesets, what have you. Again, we're going to talk about both of them. Before I even begin this video, I just want to say both of these monsters are phenomenal. They're like reviving monsters are relatively nice to have in case of the event something terrible happens. I feel like reviving monsters like Samuel, like Undertaker, like Fatid, really help you out in a pinch, and or just make sure you never lose a coin. Because usually, for the most part, it's usually just one person dead at a time. For most games, I think it depends on what you fight in terms of an AI defense, but for the most part, usually the AI likes to kill a specific thing first, rather than just keep spamming, AoE damage from, the AoE damage dealer. I think the damage dealer for the most part goes for single target damage, right? Yeah. That's what I personally feel. I think it depends on what the monster is on defense nowadays, because the AI has improved. But for the most part, they usually go for single target attacks on the lowest life, opponent that they're dealing with. And I feel like revivers are just relatively nice for those situations. And based on who you pair it up with, I think Bowtie is just universally the best thing to pair up with any reviver because he can lower the cooldowns of said moves, or in the case of the event, they get cooldowns activated. He can just, deactivate them, and you can just continue to revive to your heart's content. Now, Undertaker. What are the pros with Undertaker? Well, phenomenal resistance. I just want to say straight up the bat, I believe Undertaker has the better resistance of the two. Undertaker is resistant to light, well, no, not light damage. I guess I should say weakness, not not resistance. It doesn't have the better resistance. It has the better weakness. Now, that's odd for me to say. Dib, that doesn't sound like a good thing to have a weakness. Well, in this case, Undertaker does have the better weakness. In terms of what I would like to choose my tank not to get flambéed by, I'd much rather have the likelihood of, being weak to light damage dealers than I would with fire damage dealers, because fire damage dealers, fire in the fire category, I pretty much think of it as the caveman category, because most of its roster are genuinely damage dealers. It hasn't really evolved much, and it's just starting to spice things up now. We're getting supports, and we're getting damage dealers, like priority supports, and, not damage dealers, deniers. And I feel like with light, in the light category, I think people just more so just have a higher problem. You're more so likely the enemy's going to attack you with, like, a really good support, like, or like, I don't know, weird anti-deny stuff like Gakora, or run like a demise, just supports people, in all honesty, versus like anything else, like when you're talking about light monsters, unless it's like a Bella Ball, or like maybe Incognita, or Patreon, or Taiga, and Taiga, one of those monsters I just said, doesn't really do all that much light damage. It's like the AoE. Unless you set up for it, of course, but he doesn't really have a bursty light damage skill naturally, so you have to set up that first. For the most part, you're dealing with a light support or denier. You're not dealing with much damage dealer, so I'd much rather be a dark tank than I would with a nature tank, because nature tanks have a lot more damage to deal with. They just do. Another pro, I guess you could say, is he has a really great trade in terms of the books that he's in. In terms of the books, the Undertaker is in, two of which he actually shares with Fatid. He's actually in a third one too, so add that to the pros list. He's in 3 books, my boy, so you can use him way more often than you can with Fatid, just because of that additional book. Until Fatid gets another chapter in terms of like efficiency or like the best bang for your buck here, in terms of if you're low on monsters and you just need as much spots filled as possible, Undertaker might be your good starting boy in terms of just books, in terms of related to books. The nice thing about Undertaker's trait is being immune to all possessions in a category where there's a lot of possessors, actually. Dark is home to quite a few single-target possessors and AoE possessions. So to have this trait is relatively nice. He's also a really great counter to like Joustar, and he's a great counter to, just really any abomination monster that's kind of reliant on possession, I would say. I don't think he really counters Xiofex all too much, personally, because his damage is special based. If most of his damage was dark based, Undertaker would be able to stomach more attacks better, but there's only so much you can stomach when dealing with a Xiofex. If he prioritizes, Undertaker that's not running a life rune, a high level life rune, that's a pretty big deal, I'd say. But for the most part, whenever I see an Undertaker on defense, I usually see a life rune on it. So it can usually take a if it's just a Xiofex running maybe like, for my example, my Xiofex is running A10 and A7, it will only do about 70k to an Undertaker, and I think when you're rank 3 Undertaker, if you're running at least a level 9, I think you're over 70k. So I feel like you'll live through a single target hit, for sure, which is relatively nice. But the main reason why I say he's kind of a decent matchup for him is he's got a few things that can bother him. One, the AoE days. This guy does hold a AoE. I think between the two, here's another pro coming to your way. I think he has the better utilitative AoE. I find days really, really, really annoying. It's just extremely annoying to lose just a bit of accuracy. You lose like 25% accuracy, I believe, and it's the most tilting thing you'll ever experience when you miss an attack that can very much so cost you the game from missing. It is really huge when you miss in this game, like astronomical. And recently they have buffed Nightmares. In all honesty, I thought Nightmares was probably one of the worst things to run in the game, or like even have. It's just not a very good DOT damage, but now it passively drains your stamina. I've had games where I've actually lost simply because Nightmare was on me. With Stamina Leak, it combos well with Stamina Leaking monsters, so if you run a monster that is able to apply Stamina Leak, it can be pretty annoying. The only time I've ever seen this really get cheesed around is when you run a stamina recovery relic for when the situation pops up. If you're Nightmares and stamina leaked, that's just what I've been personally feeling. Another reason why it's kind of a good thing is he has a stunned potential. He's got 2 single target stuns, so you can stun anything that annoys you. Again, it's really great against Abomination mashups because you can just stun the Abomination monster. Although, like with the deniers, I don't think you can really stop them before they do their deny, which is problematic, I'd say. I think it depends on what the other 2 monsters you run are. I think the Mutak creature also just kind of counters Undertaker. I might as well talk about the con real quick. This thing isn't immune to freeze or stun. It's immune to all forms of possession, but he doesn't cover freezing and or stun, and he doesn't have a probability chance of not getting frozen or stun. It doesn't have like a 25%, he doesn't have like a hardened with that, this trait here. So he can be frozen, he can be stunned. Since he can be frozen, that means he also can be chain frozen. He can be chain denied, which is huge. Which is really, really huge. So if you get chain denied, it doesn't look that great for you, especially for a monster that doesn't get too many turns. And I will say both these monsters are relatively so. relatively slow. So you don't expect this to run like a marathon. You might get double turned, and it might not be pretty for you if it's the denier, because they might just chain deny you for days. It's not going to be pretty. He has a lot more. Well, I was gonna say he has a lot more self buffs, but no. Another nice thing I guess you could say with Undertaker is he does a lot of burst. Between the two, he does the better burst damage of the two. Let's say you just need to kill something at that moment, but they're at like full life. If you're running like maybe like a damage rune setup, and you do like dress to dig, you could actually KO with coffin lock. That it will KO. Like if you are running a damage rune, I'd probably say maybe like a 7. You'll for sure kill a squishy with it. You'll squish anything that's not dark type, which is huge. What else is there? What else is there? Here's a pro, alright, my boys. Between the two, he does hold cleaning in his self skill, which I think is really huge. Being able to clean oneself of DOTs and other annoying effects is relatively nice. This is on a 3-turn cooldown, mind you, but he still has the option to clean himself. I think that can be really clutch sometimes when you're just drained in like DOT or like drowning in DOT. To be able to pick oneself up again by their own self-recovery is really, really nice. I will say a con, between him and Fatid would be he doesn't have the better recovery. At most, a Undertaker can recover 50% of his life. This is his best recovery skill. The other one's a 30% heal. Fatid is probably one of the top tanks in the game. Being able to sponge so much damage with his extra turn, double healing, life regen skill, that he can also combo with another healing skill that starts at 40%, but when he has done the extra turn buff, that becomes a 80% heal, able to fully heal, just instant life reset. It's crazy. However, he can't clean himself, and between the two, Undertaker can clean himself. In some situations, that's really clutch. In other situations, it's not really relevant at all, because they'll just freeze you again or stun you. I will say if you're in a situation where all they will really do is deny you, and you don't really have either you don't have the KO potential or really your revives on cooldown, you're not in a good position. You just I think you just kind of get stun death. You don't really have a way to prevent the enemy from chain denying you unless you had prepped so ahead of time. So I think that's huge. I think that's really huge. Here's another pro for Undertaker. His stamina usage is really low. I swear, in terms of quote unquote supports, this is considered a support in the game, even though he only has one real ally related skill. He just really has like an AoE debuff and like a bunch of self buffs. He only has one ally related skill, and that's his resurrection skill. He is still considered one of the best supports in the game, simply because, again, he has a resurrection skill. Resurrecting someone is huge in this game. To be able to bring anyone back from the dead to make clutch plays is relatively huge. It is nice. What else can I say about this man? Better cooldowns. I think this guy is more so forgiving. If you get cooldowns activation, I will say between the two, I think this one has the better cooldowns, obviously. Like, if you get cooldowns activation on, like, Fatid, if you're not really running any of the DOT damage, it's just kind of a dead monster. It doesn't really do anything until the monster that's bothering it leaves, like the cooldowns activation monsters. So I think that's huge. I think that's astronomically huge. I think that's a big pro, is the cooldowns are more forgiving. Odds are you'll run, like, the AoE. You'll probably run, like, either Cryptic Doors or Coffin Lock, and you're for sure going to run the Resurrection to begin with, and either I Don't Want to Work or Dress to Dig. I would also like to note that if you do run Dress to Dig, you also give yourself immunity to stun. It also applies the double damage too, and you get the 30% heal. So theoretically speaking, if you actually get to move turn 1 and you don't really have anything to do, you could just kind of resort to do just a dig, become immune to stun, and really the only problem is freezing at that point. So it's relatively nice. I will say if you get that set up, that's nice. He gives himself immune to stun, which is good. And it's only on a 2-turn cooldown. What else is there? What else is there to say? Here's kind of a con. I think this is dependent on whether or not you have tenacity, like double tenacities. If you don't have double tenacities, I will say this relic slot isn't as impressive as your boy Fatid. Fatid did receive another change with his relics recently. It was a relic change this time, and he got the better relics pretty much in terms of a free-to-play sustainability. If you really want to go tankage, like if you really want, like the number one thing with revivers is the reviver needs to stay alive long enough to bring back the person, you know, that has died. The reviver cannot be the one dying. That's the number one thing with a reviver. The reviver by any means cannot die because you are using them to bring back people from the dead. Like you can't use them obviously to bring themselves back from the dead. So I will say sustainability is huge in the determining and all that jazz. The change with Fatid, the relic change I mean, is that he scored double armor plate, armor relics, you know. So he can run double heavy duties. Those do stack together and they all proc at the same time. So essentially you can have up to 120k, 1,000 armor. It's disgusting, I know, but he can do it if you actually do wind up getting 2 heavy duty plates, which is a gold armor relic. So it's free to play pretty much. You can pretty much get them for free. I have one at the moment through just going through the PvP and, you know, getting the rewards at the end of the seasons. I feel like it's earnable, and between the two, he doesn't have a good free-to-play relic setup. In terms of Undertaker, I mean. Undertaker doesn't have a good relic setup until you get tenacities. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Tenacity is really like think of like all the shield relics, all right? Tenacity shield in terms of competitive play pretty much takes a huge circle. It covers pretty much every single shield, with the exception of just seeing a little bit of friendship shield on the side there. That's really it. I think like a lot of people say shields are really better than armor. There's pretty much saying tenacity shield is better than armor, the armor stuff, and I would agree with that. Yeah, I'd say like to get like pretty much full life shields at the beginning of a game, like 40k at max, I believe, like 40 or 44. Just for having one set of one tenacity shield. If you have 2, that's I think that's like 88k, right? Yeah, it can get pretty disgusting. Of course, you have to level both of those up, and 2, you know, those are kind of hard to get. Like you have to get like really lucky in like either the silver relics chests or like the event progression island chests. Which it's not too lucky, you know. I didn't get any lucky when I've yet to get lucky in terms of getting a legendary relic from the free silver relic chest to come out in trailers from Crazy Weeks. But you know, again, if you get 2 tenacity shields, I will say he has the better setup. But if you don't have them, they don't do you any good. But so I think that goes on the con list. If you don't have tenacities, not very good. If you do have 2 double tenacities, really great. It's a pro at that point because he offers he offers team protection at the beginning of the game for everyone. Everyone just gets ridiculous amount of health protection at the beginning of the game. Really nice. Just overall good team sustainability at that point. You can stack it with other people if you are running other monsters with tenacity shield. If you just have like a whole bunch of tenacity shields, that's really disgusting, and 2, you probably have a breeze winning games at that point. But yeah, if you don't have double tenacities, it's not that good of a relic setup. The reason why I'm kind of saying friendship shield is just kind of on the side there. It does apply a great amount if you are running double friendships. But if you're only running one, it's only at 18,000. That's not a whole lot. That really is, and you have to run double friendship shields for it to even mean anything. And the condition is it only ever procs on people that are below 75% life. So that's really conditional. That is really conditional. I think it also only procs on the monster's turn. Like the monster that's holding friendship, I think has to have its turn in. So I don't really, I don't know. I think that's how the friendship shield worked. I think, but yeah, there's really no point to use any of the other shields. The other shields are just garbage. It's either friendship or tenacities. That's pretty much the two shields that exist. If we're gonna be honest here. Like, you can run the possession shields, yeah, but they're kind of terrible. Because you're in a situation where the monsters just aren't in your control. So it's one or the other. Yeah, just gotta let... There you go, son. Yeah, my cat's coming downstairs. I think she's... Yeah, she's gonna come downstairs here. Alrighty, down in there. Yeah. Back to the discussion. So yeah, I just think, realistically speaking, the tenacities and friendships, yeah. Possession it's currently not even your monster. So basically, they'll kill they'll pretty much kill the shield you apply to them. And it's yeah, it could just be in a bad situation. It's very situational. It depended on whether you get possessed again. I think that's the hugest thing. And again, it only procs on his turn, and odds are he'll be going last in the turn order. I just don't find really any of the other shields useful. Really, just tenacity and friendship are the only ones you should really use. I don't find the possession one all that good, and really besides the possession shield that which procs twice, the stun and the freezing only proc once, and it's just low bases. It's just garbage. Like the heavy duty, the self-sustaining plates offer so much more sustain, and their condition is just like after you get hit, and that's just like heavy duty armor or at the beginning of your turn. It's either instant or you just procs on hit. So yeah, I just think the double chest plate, double armor, relics, what have you, are just better. They just are. Here's another con with Undertaker. It's been nerfed to 50% of the person's life, or it's just been fixed. At first, it used to recover all your life. You used to be brought back from the dead with full life. This is huge. This played out with so many monsters in the game. Because basically, you just brought them back, nothing happened to them, and they're all ready to go. Now they only come back with 50% life, and there's no like additional buffs or whatever have you with Undertaker's Revival to begin with. And usually, for the most part, if you're running at 50% life without any like self-recovery skills or shielding, I will say that's really huge. You can get it knocked out pretty easily at 50% life. It is pretty huge. Yeah, that can depends on your damage dealer. If it's not something that's like ridiculous, like Voltic, or like, you know, again, no self-sustain, or what? If it doesn't have like self-sustain, it doesn't last too long. If you have nothing protecting it, that can be really, really, really huge. So it doesn't. In my personal opinion, it doesn't have the better revival skill. Like, there's no real benefit to the revival skill, again, unless you're pairing it up with specific people that either buff themselves or heal themselves, really. If you are running that, I will say it has a more stamina efficient, revival. It's only 18 stamina. The cooldown's more forgiving. It's at 3 cooldowns rather than, I believe, Fatid's 5 or 6, right? What's the cooldown on that? It's actually 3. They actually run on the same cooldown, and the stamina actually isn't all that... Okay, I guess maybe if you get stamina... Well, it doesn't really matter, too, because you're running trader. I don't think the stamina cost actually matters. Just forget about the stamina usage. It doesn't really matter too much. it doesn't, in all honesty, it doesn't matter too much. Just because he has the ability to fix his stamina issues. So with that being said, let's go to Fatid. What is your boy Fatid bring to the table that your boy Undertaker cannot? Ignore the... I don't think they've actually updated the relic slots for this man on the wiki, but he can hold double armor plates. So ignore this. Ignore this like a little section here where it says the staff and the trap relic. In all honesty, I had done a video on this beforehand, but I never uploaded it because they keep changing Fatid. So this is actually my 3rd time making this video. But just note that these slots were terrible. One of these slots were terrible. I did believe in terms of late game. And I still think this is the thing. If you have both like double tenacities, this is the better setup. But again, if you're more so a free-to-play player with horrible chest opening luck and you don't have double tenacities on you, having double chest plates on a tank that has great recovery and can bring people back from the dead with triple damage, I'd say that's really, really great in terms of a reviving standpoint. Again, revivers are meant to sponge damage and they are meant to bring people back from the dead. That being said, huge pro, this thing has so much sustain, it's crazy. Double chest plate, check. So that means you can run double heavy duty armor, running at total, if you level both relics up all the way, you have 120k, 1000 life, or even pretty much that. You have pretty much 120k additional life protection. You have armor. Armor cannot be removed by remove positive effects, so it stays until the enemy actually does that much damage to you. It can be really, really disgusting. And again, it's really easy to proc the plates. You only have to hit them and it procs. So that means if the enemy does an AoE deny, it does proc at that point. If the attack does land, it procs the chest plates instantaneously. And at that point, you have like 60k armor. Again, if you max these plates out, you have 60k armor just straight off the bat. And if you level it up to 30, that's 50k. It's disgusting how much sustain this thing has, because he also has 2 recovery skills in decomposing body and putrid organism. I've lived through so many games with just the stuff alone, with the double healing and the regen. I've been playing around with this guy in PvP. It usually never dies unless the enemy runs like maybe in an Agursis, and that at that point it's just me. I don't really have a life rune on it at that point. If you build him the same setup like with Undertaker, like you build a life rune and either like a speed and a team speed or a double team speed, you can kind of live through stuff and do things. You're allowed to do things. I will say kind of a con with this monster is he has to go before your damage dealer. So that might actually cost you a whatchamacallit in terms of your relic slots. You may or may not. It depends on how kind of a player you are. But for me, I believe this monster should go before your attacker, so you get that triple damage off easily. Here's another con. I find that, I find that in some situations, I guess it's dependent on what my enemy is running, but if they double turn it, like if my attacker doesn't get to go right after my Fatid, like in terms of natural turnover. The nice thing about Fatid's revival, not only does it bring you back 100%, give you triple damage, it pretty much makes it so, like, once you bring them back, it's the natural order. Whatever the order was when that monster had died, it's still on the board. It's like it turns it back to the way it was before that monster had died. Like in some situations, you might maybe get double turned. I don't really know. Again, I'm still testing it. Right now, at the moment, I'm running like a 4 and a 3 speed on it, just so I can go before some of my attackers. Which again, results really, really great. It's like having triple damage on your attacker is just bonkers. It does so much damage. It's disgusting. But yeah, I've had situations where the combo, like for some reason, like maybe a denier goes again and denies maybe my attacker. It varies, but for the most part, I'm winning games. If you want just a simple description ahead of time with the revival skill, it's either you win instantaneously right away, or you miss a guy and you wait a while and then bring them back. That's basically how most games go. I do find it where if you're fighting a Voltic, let's say you are fighting like something that can end game quickly, take out the Voltic right away, and for the most part, since the enemy's only running like a support, maybe it's like a healer and a denier, again, you can just sponge through it. Like, like if the denier you're running is either a cleaner or a healer, built-in functionality like a Talika or a Chrysandri, whatever has like either remove negative effects that can stay out there for a relatively long time, do things to keep itself alive. Your boy Fatid can just bring back the person that has recently died, or your attacker back up again. Because if you didn't know, the downside with the revival skill. While he does hold the 2 revival skills, I will say a pro is the nice thing is he does have 2 revival skills. They come with a heavy price while buffing them. The nice thing about Fatid's resurrections, they do buff the people that get brought back. However, you spontaneously die depending on which one you do. If you do Vineward's Infestation, you die on that turn and you cannot clean it. I find this really, really garbage. This revival skill is garbage. This AoE revival, just straight up garbage. Unless we're talking solely on defense fatted, just solely defense fatted. You're not running this on offense, just solely defense fatted. It's great for that. Garbage on any other build. It really is. Like, if you're running this on offense, this doesn't do you any good because you'll lose the coin. You'll lose a coin. Like, if you end the game with, like, for the most part, I think it's like the denier. Probably in turn 1, it's probably going to be the denier that goes immediately after you use this skill. Denier goes, even if you kill everyone for some reason, you still lose the coin. You still lose a coin, so you only get 2 out of 3. And with the revivers, you really just want to go for all 3, because why would you even bring a reviver at that point, you know? like that's whenever if I ever lose a coin because of this condition, I'd be like, why did I even bring Fatid? Why? It doesn't do me any good. I lost the coin still, you know? I don't know, but in terms of a defense setup where your sole goal is just to make the enemy lose a coin, this could probably do it. this can put you in a situation where you can do it. A lot of people would argue this is also a reason why he's kind of bad on defense, because, you know, he can possess Fatid. You know, they have double the chances of him bringing back one of your allies if you have possessed him. Again, I think that depends on the build, and another, like, pro to this monster is it doesn't really care if you possess it. Like, absolutely not. If the person isn't running Vineward's Infestation on defense, you know, they're probably running Decomposing Body, Infected, you know, no, for sure running this, the single target revival, and, like, Traitor Eater. So between Putrid Organism and Infected Breath, I think this is the most hazardous. If they're just running Putrid Organism, I mean, again, it doesn't really do all that much to him. It's just stall. It doesn't really matter if you possess Fatid, and he has a probability of either eating your Now, I've actually heard if he's possessed, I've heard that Traitor Eater, like, I think it's like a bug. I don't think he should be able to eat himself. But I've heard that he eats himself when he's possessed. I think that might be a bug and something they might change. But if you possess Fatid, he just eats someone. I think that's how it's supposed to work. He's also kind of resistant to stamina drain. I will say, if you're bringing a stamina draining reliant comp, if you're really planning on your opponent not doing anything in terms of stamina draining them, your boy Fatid can just eat someone, get all of his stamina back, and then probably revive him. That's probably what the AI will do. And then if the attacker goes after Fatid, you kind of just lose. You for sure lose a coin. If you're not bringing a fellow Fatid, I will say Fatid kind of counters Fatid, which is a con. But if you're not bringing a Fatid, and or he just kills your Fatid right away, the damage dealer, you just kind of lose a coin. it kind of makes a pointless. So I think this monster can be really, really, really trolly. I think he is a con. I do believe. I don't like the new trait as much. It says here that this guy has Mountain. He actually has 35% less likely to get hit by a status effect. So he pretty much, I think it's like the general trait, right? He just has a 35% chance not to get denied by anything, which can come really, really good. But for this monster specifically, it's not that useful. I'd much rather have immunity to freeze, stun, and mega freeze. I will say, what if he would have been immune to all the, like, 2 of the 3 basic deny in the game? I think that would have been fantastic for this monster specifically. Because again, it doesn't really matter if you possess him. like it matters none. At the moment, I think it does, but beyond that, I don't think it really does. They might change it again. They might change Traitor Eater. That might be a bug. I don't think he should be able to eat himself, but he just has a lot of utility to get him out of it. And again, he doesn't care about stamina rating either. And the person he brings back is going to be up and ready to go. He's going to have full stamina, full life, with triple damage. But him being able to get denied and frozen, stun, what have you, that is the hugest thing ever. I will say, This monster used to be a really great answer to Talika. I thought that if this thing was still kept its mountain trait, there was really no point to use Talika anymore. Like, in terms of an offensive substance, everyone's just going to put this thing on here with Mountain. Because he'll never be able to cover Fatid, and all Fatid would probably ever do is eat his ally that got stunned recently and bring them back. It would have been really, really pointless, but now that has changed. So he has 5% less likely to get hit by a deny effect. This may or may not matter if you're running, effective breath, so you have a less likelihood of getting hit with possession. So if you are running the effective breath move, it's relatively nice for you. But in terms of everything else, I felt like Mountain was such a better trade, and I do believe this is kind of a con because he doesn't get immunity to solid deny. This was also a really good answer to Cryotan. Like, Cryotan's really, 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 really good in terms of dealing with anything that's not immune to Mega Freeze. But if you were able to run Fatid here, I feel like that was a good answer for him. If you ever were in an Evil Legions, I think Cryotan's an Underworld. I don't really remember, but yeah, that's something that's relatively sad. I feel like with this trade, he could have countered several monsters that are relevant in the game at the moment, but he doesn't have that anymore, sadly. Cons, the ult's terrible. Between Undertaker's heal, in terms of self-sustainability, I think it's better because if you have the double heal up, it's relatively nice. Full life reset. This thing excels at getting all of his life back. Even if he's on the brink of death, he'll have all of his life back by a matter of seconds if his moves are up. Undertaker here has the better ultimate because it does special damage 1. So if you're running the double damage self buff, if you have that currently up and you pull this move out, for sure probably a wipe on something. Someone's dead. And usually the squishy, something squishy that's dead at this point. Applies bleeding, which is nice. And you heal yourself by 100%. So also a full life reset, but you don't need to have the self buff up. You just get it right away. And it restores all your cooldowns. So if you got cooldowns activation and you got this skill, one that's really nice, really relevant, and it's just awesome. So you have your full cooldowns again. This is probably one of the better self ults in the game, if we're going to be honest here, that also hits enemies. Or at least it applies, it applies self effects while also dealing a whole bunch of damage to everyone. This is a relatively nice ult. I will say between the two, Fatid has the worst ult. After 3 turns, everyone will die, but you can clean that. And I feel like Fatid can easily live 3 turns. Like, living is not the problem. Again, Fatid can sponge a lot of damage. What he can control is you cleaning the delayed kill debuff. If you bring stuff to cleanse, this ult's just kind of worthless. And it even does like 40 damage. It's just terrible in terms of just effects. They're not too reliant. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Okay, let's talk about I'd probably say the hugest con for this man. Old Fart Machine here, which is a pro. I will say the pro. One of the best named moves in the game. Fart Machine, my boys. Hashtag Fart Machine. One of the biggest cons I personally think with Fatid is that you can kind of run Agursus against him. Like, Agursus is in both of the books that Fatid is in. So Regursus will always be an option, and 2, this thing's weak to fire monsters, and we currently have a meta where everyone's running rank 5 Agursus. And if you're not running at least I will say if you're not running at least a decent single life rune on that Fatid, he's just going to instantaneously blow up. I guess it depends on the situation too. I suppose it depends on what the relics you are running at that point too. But for the most part, if you don't have double heavy duty set up right, like, at the moment, you kind of lose out to pretty much any Agursus running a damage rune that uses Krakatoa or the other fire move, T-Day. Yeah, if they're running T-Day, you can kind of walk over this. I think so. I think that's the case, Sorry if I'm still unsure on stuff, but I think that's lethal. I believe a rank 5 Agursus might possibly still have lethal over you, even though you are relatively rank 4. I will say, if you see a Fatid on defense, odds are it's rank 4, and you kind of run 60k life, maybe 65k life. But for the most part, whenever I see an Ursus do damage, I usually see at least 40k naturally. If it's a level 10 strength rune, I do believe it's around 40k. Just by natural damage. Like Ursus does a lot of damage naturally, and I'm pretty sure you take 50% more. So you're probably close to death, either dead or close to death when you're not running a life rune, and or not have your heavy duty chest plates up an atom. I do believe you just kind of lose to that. So not the best weakness for him. I will say, in terms of nature tanks, he's probably the more than likely the one to actually sponge a fire-based skill. I will say that. Nature tanks in the game have kind of a bad rep because that's kind of what the category is really filled with. Fire monsters were filled with heavy-duty damage dealers. Again, like primitive. During the nature primitive time, I think nature has just evolved immensely. Through this year alone, because we've gotten so many deniers and useful monsters, just astronomical improvements. It's better. It's kind of home to tanks, like nature tanks. Everyone just kind of laughs at this category because a lot of its monsters are just nature tanks, and its counter is the fire category, which is home to cavemen that do damage with like double damage buffs, what have you. And Fatid here is really, really just a shining example of just laughing. If you are running at least a really good life rune on him at rank 4, he just kind of laughs at it. He just laughs like, wait, was that damage you did, my boy? I can take another one. Give me another one, because I'm just going to regen all that life back, my boy. Especially if you're running the decomposing body and putrid organism, you just get full life reset. It's disgusting how much life you get back. This is a really, really good nature tank. It's just able to sponge damage and just laugh at things. It has like the best face to laugh at things too. Total memeage approaching, my boys. My computer's running low on power. I gotta put a charger in. But yeah, I think that's the hugest con is it's a common matchup with Ursus. And it's not the only problem that he sees, too, in the Evil Legions and Underworld book. I do believe it's also home to quite a few fire monsters for both categories. The Inheritor, you have to deal with, in terms of the Underworld book here, my boys. The Inheritor, Rador. As much of a joke Raby is, he does do a lot of fire damage. Igneous, disgusting damage dealer once he has his setup, which isn't too hard. Just easily melts. I think Igneous is probably just the total meltage. As soon as he sets up on it's Fatid here. He does the burn hater and the fire weakness. Fatid's no longer exists. It does so much damage, my boys, especially if you're running like 7s, I think. If you're running at least level 7 runes on Igneous, you for sure melt anything in the game at that point. Once you've set up, it's disgusting. It's disgusting once you have the damage set. Again, it doesn't even take that long too. It's just like a turn of setup, and then the next turn you just melt anything you want. Anything's gone. Like that's how Igneous works. He sets up, and then whoever he wishes dead, they be dead. Or just everyone. He also has an AoE. A lot of people just kind of underestimate the damage, but once you have the setup, that's a lot of damage. Once you pretty much take like triple, it can be pretty nasty. I think it's like up to like a 60 damage AoE, I believe. It's just nasty. It's nasty what Igneous can do once he sets up. But you see my point here. He has to deal with quite a few problems with fire-related weakness. He has a much more common weakness in his own element. He also has to deal with Tharma's bodyguard in the Evil Legions. There's just a lot of things he has to deal with in terms of that just kind of soil his tankiness. Depending on the build, if you're just going full team speed, that will soil the tankiness, especially if you're not running Putrid Organism. But if you are running a life rune with Putrid Organism, you can sponge quite a bit of damage, at least. I'd say give or take 3. I feel like you could live 3 turns, or 4. Again, that's depending on if you're running Putrid Organism with a life rune, and that I don't think that's including the relic setup yet. I will say if you do have the relic setup, if you are running like 2 level 30s at the very least of heavy duty chest plates, you'll be able to sponge quite a bit of damage. I will say in terms of sponging damage, once you have those armor relics set up, you're really good for a while. Fatid can sponge a lot of damage. It's just a sponge. It's a damage sponge. He sponges so much damage. Obviously, that sponging will be ruined if by various things, due to triple damage from other Fatid supports, self double damage buffs with really good strength runes from fire monsters. The list goes on with things that could possibly single this guy out, and you want that with revives. You want to single out the reviving monster. The whole point of a reviver is to bring someone back from the dead. So your main objective, if you're fighting a Fatid or Undertaker, you need to kill them right away. That has to go. They have to leave the field, or else they're just going to bring something you don't want to see back. And for the most part, there's either the denier we don't want to see or the damage dealer, and since they're the support, they can bring back one of the things you don't like. And that's huge. It's huge if Fatid brings back the damage dealer. I will say if he does the single target revival skill and brings back the damage dealer, game win, instant win, depending on whose attacker just got revived. That is really huge. Whoever gets revived by Fatid's revival skill, again with the attacker, that's huge. That is astronomically huge. It's an instant wipe if it lands. Like if the enemy uses an AoE, it's usually an instant win. Because a lot of people like to play glassy in this game. Really glassy, like speed tank, speed, denying setup, what have you. They don't really like to toy around with tanks. Unless you're a Gursus, rank 5 Gursus. That's really one of the few tanky damage dealers that people really ever use. Because it doesn't really there's really not much of a sacrifice. Because that's just how Gursus is. He's got great numbers and damage and great trait. Just all around really good and great life sustainability. Can hold a chest plate. Again, armor plates are really great in self-sustain. They provide so much armor. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, final verdict. Let's say you are just starting the game and you have relatively nothing in your arsenal. Like you just straight up, you don't have anything. Like just straight up, if you don't have any monsters, if you're thinking, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, Dib, what do you recommend for just me starting out? I don't have much runes, I don't have much of anything. Personally, I think your boy Fatid is kind of a great starting monster, simply because you get a lot of value from the triple damage that he provides. Let's say you're just running the basic 5s. Let's say you're just from a team or like you just don't have anything really. Like you just have like the basic stuff. Let's say you just got everything done and you have the basics. I do believe when you use the basics is you have all the temples at 100, you just have 100 level 100 monsters. I think this is a good first pickup because this gives you damage. This gives you triple damage. Triple damage usually clears boards. Like you do so much damage with triple damage up. This is something I would personally go with if I was in your shoes. If I didn't have any, if I was just starting out in terms of monster collections, or like just in terms of lack of ranked up monsters, I would probably go with Fatid first because I find being able to buff the person I'm bringing back from the dead at full life relatively useful. I also forgot to mention you can remove the single target revival on his revival skill on Fatid's. So if you're running like a Telekahu or just really any damage dealer that cleans themselves, or just like any denier that cleans, AoE cleans, you're pretty much solid. There's really no consequences to Fatid's revival, as on the condition you actually prepare for it, and that isn't really too hard to do so. There are quite a few deniers in this game that clean too, as well as deny, or quite a few damage dealers that can self-clean themselves, like Lao Lao and again Telekohu. But if I had like everything in the game, if I had like double tenacities in my possession, I'd probably, and ranked up monsters, like if Fatid and Undertaker here were both the same rank, I'd kind of lean towards Undertaker because again, double tenacity shield's just stupid. It's just a fantastic relic setup. It's just the best in the game. You get so much sustainability from having double tenacities. It's just dumb. Again, he has the better ults too, better cooldowns. But if we're just straight up talking beginnings, just like starting at the beginning of the game, and you don't have a really much relics to your name, your boy Fatid's really, really good for beginners. It's just, again, it's just one of the best tanks in the game. There's nothing you can really do wrong with Fatid, I think. I think Fatid's, again, with reviving monsters, reviving monsters, they can't really do anything wrong. They only can give to the player and their teammates by bringing them back from the dead. They're very, very useful. And in terms of dealing with single target reliant comps, or like AIs that just prioritize single target damage and just kind of kill things like a single person, and you could just bring them back. I will say it takes time to get used to Fatid's playstyle. You have to really get used to the monster. I will say mess around with it a few times in PvP. I will say learn for yourself what works and what doesn't work. I will say a thing that does not work is things that doesn't clean house turn 1. If you don't have a monster with an AoE, it doesn't really do you any good. But I feel like having an AoE on attacker is a given anyway. I don't think there's really any monster in the game besides Baratigor who just runs solely single target damage. I think the other is really Voltaic. Like Voltaic doesn't really do you much good when you pair it up with Fatid. You know, just look at the stuff that just doesn't work with Fatid. If you can determine what does and what does not work with Fatid, you've kind of mastered Fatid. You've kind of understood the basics of Fatid. Is really the hugest goal with Fatid is just to stay alive and bring back the damage dealer, the clean house, and he does that so well. I've won so many games with Fatid. It's ridiculous. Because, again, he doesn't really need much. He just needs to go before the damage dealer, and the damage dealer needs to go immediately after him. And for the most part, the move works like that. His trait's also more forgiving, like in terms of beginning, because, again, 35% less likeliness to get hit by a status effect. And if you're all running, like, the DOT moves, like either Rotten Claw or Infected Breath, that just offers more to the probability of you not using it on yourself if you're possessed, which is relatively nice. Again, this guy holds like 2 extra turn skills too. So again, it's just more player friendly. It's more free to play friendly because he's just really, really does a lot of the things on his own, and he's only asking for very so little. All he really asks for is an awesome damage dealer. It doesn't even need to be busted on the condition you have just like the basic setup, and it's not like an attacker that needs multiple damage to get multiple turns to get the damage in like Voltaic. You're kind of good. You don't really need much of anything else. That's really all Fatid's asking for. He's got a lot of self-sustain. He doesn't need all too much in order to help you in return. It's a very forgiving monster, I think. It offers so much to the table. In terms of Undertaker's case, while it is, like, again, he only brings them back at 50%, it's really easy to KO things at under 50% or less, depending on whether or not you're a tank. And for the most part, you're bringing back your damage dealers, which usually aren't tanks, unless it's, like, again, like an Agursus, or something you have personally ranked up and like running a Rainbow Rune build, but for the most part, if it's just non-life ruined, 50% life isn't really all that much, and you'll just get blown up instantaneously, depending on if the enemy attacker is still alive, and or if you just got denied and DOT'd at once. I think it depends on that. Overall, both monsters are fantastic. Get both of them. I think you should get both of them personally. They're just really good in their own respective categories to begin with, and they're both usable in their books, despite their weaknesses to specific monsters in the book's category. Like Undertaker, he has problems with freezers and stunners, and odds are there's freezers and stunners in Evil Legions and Underworld, and probably the Undead too, right? There's gotta be at least one freezer or stunner or something here. There's Bastet and Harasami. I think Harasami here is probably the most likely person people would probably bring to an Undertaker fight. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this discussion video. If you guys got any questions, ask away in the comment section below. Obviously, the video is ending, so yeah, I'm DibtheAwesome, and I'll catch you guys later.